Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well. I'm Avril Hepner, and I'm from the BDA in Scotland. And today we're here again for our usual BSL Blethers. So, what have we got in store for you for August 2022? Well, we have a deaf person who was the first ever BSL user ordained minister. I showed you the old sign for it, and this is the new sign. So we're here to talk about our journey and what was it like for a deaf person to go through the process. So I'm really excited to speak to Mary Whittaker. Welcome, Mary. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for coming here today. Could you introduce yourself just to our audience, please? My name is Mary Whittaker. And where are you based, Mary? It's north, isn't it? Well, I'm from Elgin. He obviously. But where is Elgin for a deaf audience? It's the northeast of Scotland. It's near Aberdeen, or rather, it's between Aberdeen and Inverness, right in the middle. That's Elgin. Oh, that's a beautiful place of the country. Oh yeah, absolutely, Avro. So, how long have you been in Elgin? Is that Have you been based there for a long time? Well, about 15 years now, 18 years maybe, actually. Wow, time flies. So today I'm so delighted you're here because I get a chance to ask you lots of questions about your journey becoming the first deaf BSL ordained minister in Scotland. So wow, it's just amazing for us to look at our sign language and it being prolific now within the Church of Scotland through yourself, Mary. So, can anybody, you're only Minister for the Deaf in whole of Scotland? Yes, I've at the moment. I'm the big D, the culturally deaf sign language user. I'm the only one. So, how long ago was it that you actually were ordained or became a minister? How long ago was that? Well, I became ordained. Ordained. I see that new sign. Well, ordained just means it's official recognition, and the reason the handshake, the signs like this, is to show the laying of the hands on your head, and that means you've officially became a minister. And it was in 2011, so 11 years ago. I was ordained and been doing it for 11 years. I'm based in Lottymouth, and that's the sign for it, Lottymouth. So you were ordained in Lottymouth? Fabulous. I know our deaf audience will have never maybe seen that sign before, and you've explained that it's about laying someone's hands on your head, and that act becomes the official part of ordination. So, could I take you back, Mary, and ask you what motivated you? What was your influence? If you wanted to become a minister, was it a lifelong ambition? Well, Avril, all my life as a child, I went to hearing church, and I felt it offered me nothing. I couldn't understand a thing. My mother would try and, tell me what they were saying by over exaggerating her lip pattern, but we weren't allowed to sign then. I just sat there really unhappy and not knowing what was going on. But as I grew up, I moved to college, and that was next to Boston Spa School in England. Oh, Burwood Park, sorry. And whereabouts is that? That's in Surrey. Surrey, that's right. Surrey. Oh, I didn't know the sign for Surrey, Avril, thank you. And there was one deaf person there had said to me, do you want to go to the deaf church? And I was like, what? Deaf church? And I wasn't quite sure, but I'd been to sort of a deaf church event with my mother when I was about 15, and she took me to sit there. And I'll be honest, I hadn't a clue because they weren't signing, it was just finger spelling. And finger spelling is just a form of English. You know, and that was in London, this deaf church. So I didn't really get much from then. But anyway, I was encouraged to go to this new church, and I went and I arrived, and oh my goodness, my jaw hit the floor. These were these deaf leaders in the church, all signing away, and I knew I'd found what I was looking for, and that's what I was after. So when I moved back to Scotland, I had they had some sort of deaf church, but it was deaf churches, but they were hearing led. But I really wanted to see someone there up front signing naturally, and I thought I could do that. So that was sort of my aim, that's what I wanted to do. So I had to go to university part-time. Well, I started, let me get my notes, in 1998. And the reason for that is it was part-time. You had to do two sort of like each module and course was building up until you finally passed. And then I was ordained. So how long was the course? Well, it was part-time and it was over, let me think, 5 years. Wow, 5 years, that's a lot. Yep. If you wanted to become if you want to go and become a minister, you would have to go and do another 2 years. So really, it's about 7 years of study. Yeah, but it's worth it, Avro. It's absolutely worth it, of course. So where did you study? Was it what university? Was it a special university? It was in Aberdeen. Aberdeen University. And you were there for 7 years? Yes, I was. And did you find that a good place, for learning? Oh yeah, definitely. I found the environment really good. So you went to the course, and I know it would be difficult, to think about how you would do translation with in church with metaphors and things. How about did you get interpreters? Well, I didn't get interpreters. What I had CSWs. But remember, at that time, this was the first time that I was doing the course, and it was 1998. And I did tell them that I was deaf and I needed an interpreter. And they were like, oh, okay, right, we'll have to get this sorted. And then the class was just about to start, and I reminded them again, just you stay at home, we'll sort things out, we'll just post you the information. And I thought, okay, let that go for a while. And then the next day, I was getting posted materials. And I thought, okay, they were from the university, so opened them up. And what was it? A vivid audio cassette for me to listen to. I couldn't stop laughing. So, Mary, what happened? What did you do? Well, I just met my friend. We both had the best giggle about it. We tried to, they were getting an interpreter. They came in, we've got an interpreter at level 1. That's basic signing. I'm at university level. So it took a lot of explaining till we finally got in there. It's sad to hear, but it is nothing new, Mary. But anyway, eventually you got a CSW that you're happy with and a note taker too. So there would be sign and then note taking, and I'd have I needed the note taker because, as you know, Afro, how can you watch something and take notes at the same time? As soon as I move my eyes, I'm missing it. So the note taker really knew this course well. So the notes were so clear and in such a good order. They were really useful. I mean, I was just thinking to myself, so you've been in a course for 7 years altogether, learning all this new information. So this course, I'm imagining this course is like, forgive me if I'm wrong, reading the Bible and things like that. But you told me recently when we were having a wee chat that actually it's a lot more than just reading scriptures. You have debates, and quite furious debates as well. Can you tell us a wee bit more about that, Mary, so our audience can understand what happens? Well, the course is obviously theology, and that's the study of religion. And we look at the history, and we look at different ways of worshipping and how people worship. Some worship in the way that in the theology, they go away to old times where maybe there's an old altar, and other people have different styles. It could be just everybody together and all chatting in a more relaxed way. So people have their own preferences, and I found that was quite interesting, and it could be quite divisive. So we used to have lots of debates about that and look at different perspectives, and I found that so interesting. Well, I suppose you learned, different methods of how you present yourself. I'm just thinking about when I was teaching sign language, I would look at other people to see how they would do it and maybe incorporate some of that or adapt it. But could you tell me more about these debates? So what are they like? Right, well, there was lots of debates and they could last for hours. So they would take something from the Bible, something that Jesus said, or you were to say Jesus did say that, and this was a debate, and both were yay or nay. And I loved it, watching how they would construct their arguments, and it made me think. I never thought in that way before. And the reason is that a Bible is a translation already, of those stories, and then everybody translates it differently. So we do have different perspectives based on people's own life experience. Well, I suppose that's really good because that gives you an opportunity to sort of broaden your horizon and take on other people's views, and they can challenge yourself, I suppose, as well. Absolutely. And that was good for me, and it was great. That's part of life, So, it challenged my opinion and I give my answer back. So can I ask you, when you were going through all your studies and having your debates and all the other things that went along with it, is there like an exam at the end? Oh yes, there's a mandatory exam. I get extra time simply because English is my second language, so it has to be translated to me first. And I've got the option of presenting in sign or in English. I chose to do it in English, and the reason for that was it was just simplicity more than anything. When you write in English, it's easier to look back on what you've said. If you're signing, sometimes you can't remember if you've said it all already. So for me, I use the English to help me remember where I was at. So what's the questions like? Do they ask you like questions on theory? And well, there's 3 questions and you choose one of them. And you've got an hour to write this whole thing down. You down one A4, down the other A4, and turn over and turn over and turn over. So do you do anything like stand-up exams, like in the church where you have to give a sermon or anything? So no, 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 that's completely separate, Avril. No, university is a standard written exam. Once you've done your exams, you go to the church to learn your sort of practical experience. You've done the theory at university, and then the next part is the tacit knowledge, if you like, process knowledge at university, tacit practical knowledge. Once you've finished, you pass your exam at university. Now, what happens is that once you've completed your paper, you can get some feedback. It's not a case of they're wanting the best out from you. And then after that, you can ask people to help you when you're giving sermons for feedback and support. Okay, so you got ordained, and now you're a minister. But what areas do you cover in Scotland? Or is it you're just responsible for your local area? Avril, I have responsibility from Perthshire right up north to the Shetland Islands. So from Perth straight up, and then if you look from Aberdeen in the east to the Outer Hebrides, and also the Isle of Skye. Wow, that's a massive demographic. Do you travel a lot? Oh, yes, Avril, and I love it. I wouldn't change it. I love it traveling around. I know that you know, usually people typically say that the busiest day for a minister is on a Sunday. It's not true, Mary. No, a Sunday is a rest day for us too. All we have to do is go to church like everyone else, lay out everything, start the sermon, go through everything, do whatever activities, whatever we're going to do. We might even play some games, some learning stuff. But once my job is finished, that's it. That's me. I'm off duty and I get to relax. A Monday to a Thursday, I do lots of preparations for the sermon and do the visits. On a Friday, that's my day off. Oh, so you have a day off on a Friday? Yes. So you work 6 days a week? Yes, 6 days a week. And a Saturday is making sure that everything's all ready for the Sunday, making sure you've got everything in order, everything's all ready, you name it, prep has to be done. Okay, so you said Monday to Thursday you visit people. Is that people who may be in hospital or in a hospice, or is it maybe people who have passed away and you're talking to the families? Oh yes, after all of that. It is definitely a Monday to a Thursday, not on a Friday. I do visit hospitals. I'd visit care homes. And there's been issues in the past, you imagine with COVID. But I'm obviously allowed in. And, the reason is there's maybe one deaf person in that whole place and they're all hearing and they can communicate with each other, but that deaf person's got no one. So after a lot of convincing, I was able to get in and making sure that I could become a regular visitor. And you should see the deaf people's faces. They were just so happy to see us. They were there and they were getting no sign. It was complete language deprivation. And everybody was wearing a mask. So all they could see was these eyes behind a mask and they weren't telling us anything. So I also visited deaf people in their own home. I can remember maybe someone who had passed away or something had happened. Or, maybe if you couldn't get inside, we'd go to a window and sign from outside or, keep a distance. Oh, Mary, that's amazing that you did that all the way through COVID. You still worked, made sure that you had connection with deaf people. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was no church. I mean, church was closed. But, I'm like, there's more that we can do. It's not just about, the church. We can do things. At that time, there wasn't even thinking about online. So I've decided to write a letter, I typed a letter actually, and I put loads of pictures on it to illustrate what I was trying to say. And I actually did it in using deaf English, and you know what that is, Avril, how we would write BSL in order. And I showed them how it was. And that was lovely, and they really, really appreciated that. Well, we've already getting questions in, Mary, already. Would you believe it? Just having a wee look to see which question we've got and who it's from. Oh, here we go. So we've got our first question, and that's from Erin. And the question is just about to pop up on the screen. So the question says, do you get a BSL interpreter for you whilst you work as a deaf minister, or do you only focus on delivering sermons to BSL users who are deaf? Oh no, I do both. Sometimes I have deaf only. Most is deaf people have hearing families, you know that. So sometimes we need an interpreter there because we want to make sure everybody's inclusive, and particularly in things like funerals and things like that. So we really want to prepare. But obviously, if I go to deaf people, I just sign myself. Right, so I get what you mean. So when you're going to meet deaf people yourself, you don't need an interpreter or anything like that. But maybe if you were going to visit someone and they had hearing family, you wanted to talk with them, you would bring an interpreter. But it's rare, Avril. Right, I've got you. Right. So if you bring an interpreter, how do you get that? Does the church pay or is it access to work? Well, actually, I have both. If it's like training or meetings or anything that's personal with an interpreter, I have access to work that will cover that. However, for the deaf church or any religious activities, and there's hearing people there, or or maybe I'm going to a hearing church, then I will get an interpreter, but the church then would pay that. That wouldn't come out of my access to work budget. So I use both. So when it's for something for me, personally benefiting me, then I use my access to work. Well, I think someone else is asking another similar question, so that's great. We've covered that. So Erin's question is, what made you feel that you wanted to become a deaf minister? Was it the barriers or you experienced, or was it something else that that maybe influenced you? Well, you're right. My experience was just barriers. I always wanted to not just push through those barriers, but break them down and smash them to bits. All I wanted was access. And I felt strongly that I'm deaf and I knew about our culture and our traditions and everything. And I wanted to just get down and shake the tree and make sure this happened. There's a question coming in. It's a text question and another question coming in through Facebook. Did you have any role models, deaf role models, or maybe hearing role models, or ministers, or people maybe that influenced you in your journey? I did. I absolutely did. The Deaf Christian Fellowship, they were in London, and I can remember the first time. So the Deaf Christian Fellowship, yes, that's correct. Yeah, so they're in London, based in London, and I can remember my friends, both of us had went there just to have a wee nosy, really. And honest to goodness, we were absolutely shocked. Everybody was signing, they were all deaf. It was culturally appropriate, everything was there. There was no music we couldn't hear, but they used visual stuff and they were signing songs. They did everything to accommodate me, and I knew that's what I want. So, is there any deaf or hearing ministers around you that in the UK that you were influenced or inspired by? There's been a few, absolutely, and I suppose it depends the situation. I can remember one person, and he sort of worked really in the community, but he worked in the deaf gay community, and he was telling me all about the deaf gay community, and that was so interesting to find out about that. And there was other people who were role models for me who had given amazing sermons, but also the people who are able to gather the information. That's how I looked at them, and I kind of copied that. I could remember, when I was young, sitting on Sunday at church, and the minister was maybe giving the sermon, and I so desperately wanted to interrupt, but you couldn't, because in hearing culture you're not allowed. But now that I've been a minister, I now remember what it was like for me. So I encourage our deaf people to make sure it's culturally appropriate. If you don't understand, you need something clarified, interrupt. That's how we converse. Absolutely, Mary. Dialogue. That's like we're doing in BSL Blethers. That's how deaf people love information being given to them. We've got another question that's come in. And the question's from, I think it's Justin. So, hang on. Yeah, it's Jordan Anderson. So, what's it like being the first deaf minister in Scotland? I see this big love heart there. Wow. So, how does that feel for you, Mary? Oh, pride. I'm so proud, honestly, Afro. I just shows that deaf people can do it, and we can feel pride the same as everyone else, and pleasure and happiness. So maybe other deaf people are out there watching and maybe feel like you maybe want to join and become a minister. And maybe, there'll be more. You'll be a role model for other deaf people. We have ministers all over the UK. But within the UK, is there ministers and priests as well? Yes. Is there a lot? Well, we have them. How many do you think in the UK? Oh, there's a question. I would say maybe around 12 altogether, and that's all the religions. And there's new people coming in all the time, particularly in England. I'm trying to encourage our Scottish people that are doing better in England. Maybe in the future, you need to get deaf people to come to things, and maybe you then pass the baton on to the next deaf minister to keep on making sure everyone's okay. We've got another question in, and this is from Linda Richards. So Linda's question is, you work in the top half of Scotland. Suppose there's a Scottish person in London who wants you, for example, a wedding or a funeral. Are you allowed to go out with your sort of area to do this? No, sadly. Scotland only. It is, I have to. The Church of Scotland, that's the church I belong to. The Church of England has its own ways of doing things. However, but in Scotland, I can go outside my boundary area. For example, last year I was asked to go to Kilmarnock, and I accepted that job. That was not a problem for me, and I went down to Kilmarnock. So yeah, for special reasons, I can go out of Scotland. Sorry, Linda, but yeah, I have to say I had to ask permission to go. It's not something I can just decide myself. I have to ask. Thank you. Okay, I've covered that question. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to hold those because I've got my own questions, Mary, that I want to ask you as well. So, could I ask, what's the services? So it's funerals, weddings, what else? Baptisms, of course, baptisms, yes. But also adults as well can be baptized. It doesn't have to be babies, so it could be adults too. And we use quake, a Scottish quake. It's a silver bowl. Yeah, it's a Gaelic word. We spell it Quaich. It's just a silver bowl. It's called a quake, and it's a traditional Scottish drinking vessel, and it's for celebrations. And we use that. We put the water in it and baptise the children and adults, and then we give it back to the family as a memory, a keepsake. So the weddings you do, is it deaf weddings only, hearing weddings, and I believe you do deaf blind weddings too? Yes, I have so proud. I have done 2 deaf blind weddings this year, and I was asked by the couple. They came up to me after seeing me doing another wedding, and asked me if I would do it. So I had to do hands-on. Oh, it was lovely. I met the couple beforehand. We discussed everything, what the processes were happening, what to expect, and I explained to them about vows and the rules and how we do things. We talk about poems. Do you want singing? Probably not. That's fine because it's their wedding. They have to decide. It's what they want. I'm there to respect their wishes. So regarding the vows, I gave them 2 choices, as there is 2 choices. Either for us doing it with hands on, so I could have signed the line that they were to say, and then they could have copied me and signed that to their partner, or could it be that I would then, the second option would be ask the question, and the answer, all they have to do is say, I do, and look to the partner and say, I do. So it was the choice of signing it all fully or I do, and it was up to the couple themselves what they wanted. For deaf blind people, they felt it was so much easier because it was so beautiful. It could be hands-on or visual frame, depending on what the needs were. So if you can imagine this visually, I had my hands touching both the bride and the groom, given the questions, but when they were giving their vows to each other, they were doing it to only each other's hands and not me. It was so beautiful. So it's twice you've done it? Yeah, twice this year, Afro. Wow, very amazing. Oh, it must be such a different experience from sort of, I suppose, a sort of traditional wedding. You know, oh yeah, yeah, it is. It's completely different. It's a complete break with the tradition. You know, in normal sort of traditional church, the bride has one side of the church and the groom has the other. Family and friends sit in the seats. But for this wedding, this was about the bride and groom. So we had all the deaf blind people all moved at an angle so that they could see right at the front and they could see both the bride and groom, and all the hearing family and friends, they went back because they could still see and they could hear what was going on because there was a voiceover. So it was just so lovely that everybody there was accommodated. And then at the end of the service, the deaf blind person came up and said, "I'm just so happy, thank you, thank you, thank you," and just said, I just felt so involved. I felt it was my wedding. And oh, that's just so amazing. And at a wedding recently, and this doesn't happen. Sometimes we've had a dogs, and that day we had 11 dogs. Oh, of course, deaf, blind, hearing dogs for the deaf. Yeah, so we had to manage and accommodate 11 hearing dogs for the deaf, and we did it. Fabulous. Oh, that must have been amazing seeing all these people sitting in different places than they're usually sitting in the dogs. Oh yeah, we've got so many um uh there were so many gifts for people that were saying thank you for being there. Um, and they put like the dogs. They gave the dogs bows and things like that. Oh, it was really they were all part of the whole thing. And I know that's the lovely part. I can imagine, but I can also imagine it can't be easy when it's end of life or a death, particularly within the deaf community, because we tend to know of each other if we don't know each other. Yeah, you're right. There was been a lot of funerals, and I found when I met the people and we discussed, beforehand to plan the funeral and what they wanted the funeral to be like, that deaf people were really straight. They were quite straightforward in telling you what they wanted, and they would accept you sort of being emotional and welling up. That's a visual reaction. That's okay, and within the deaf community, that's absolutely fine. So what I would do is I would type up the sermon and I would send it to the interpreters to make sure that they're totally understanding what's going on. And I use that time when I'm writing the sermon to get out all these emotions so that when the day comes, I can stand there and have this kind of sort of like professional stance. And I'm telling you, it's not easy because you're standing right up there and all you can see is all these faces with seas of tears in their eyes. And it's really, really hard. I mean, I'll give you an example of what happened. There was one time I was at a funeral and I was with a hearing minister at the time, and we were working together. But we went to the burial, and it was a deaf person at the burial, and I was signing away, and honestly, the emotion was coming to me, and I just turned my head, and I just sort of gathered myself together, and the hearing minister, honest to God, he nearly bit my head off. He's like, "You're not allowed to do that," and I nearly jumped out my skin. But the interpreter was right on it, and the interpreter went straight there politely, without anybody seeing it, and explained, "This is the deaf world. This is culture. It's a small world. This is just a natural reaction. We know these people." And oh well, he was well put in his place. So do you have mentors or support for things like that? Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I do. Definitely do. Is that a deaf person? No, no, it's a hearing person, and they are brilliant. I told you, Avril, I'm the only one deaf person minister in Scotland, so my mentor, well, is going to be hearing, but she's great. I can lip read, use lots of gestures, and we have this really good rapport. Do you have any like connections with other deaf, ministers, priests in the UK? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We meet in the UK. What's this called? It's called this sign. It's called clergy. Clergy. So it means ministers, priests. It includes all that. Anybody really for the church. So church elders could be there. Roman Catholic priests can be there. Church of England can be there. All different religions come together. Yep, and there's deaf people there. and it's once a year we all meet. But at the moment, obviously, we haven't met because of COVID for the last 3 years, and the Zoom ones are just not the same. They just can't cover all the bases. Yeah, I get that. So that's great that you've got support and you've got mentoring. But when you travel, do you go to some deaf clubs and things like that just to check on, like from Perth to Shetlands and from Aberdeen out to Hebrides away over in Skye? I mean, when you're based in Elgin. Oh yeah, I have a service every week in Elgin. But I mean, there's not a lot of deaf clubs now. You're right, Avril. A lot of them have just disappeared. Murray here and Elgin, we've got one. Aberdeen's got one, and a lot of the other ones. I think there's only three. Oh, Dundee, I've forgotten. Excuse me, Dundee. Dundee has a deaf club as well. That's great. Now, as I said before, everybody says ministers are only busy on a Sunday. And we know that's not true. But, when you're visiting people at home or hospital, do you get plenty of tea and biscuits? Is that true? Is that your experience? Or is it completely different now? Are you happy with the tea and biscuits? I've learned, Avril, that when I was in training with someone, we went to houses. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I felt it was too much coffee all day. And I didn't like to ask for the toilet, but I was full up all the time. So I'm trying to manage not going to the toilet and be polite. But now I know that if I go to a deaf person's house, I can just say, "Do you know what? I'm fine. I had one earlier. Thank you so much." And people accept it. So it's not impolite now to say no. But yeah, it used to be that when ministers or priests went to a house, they were just fed tea and biscuits. And I always thought that that's all you got. But yeah, absolutely though, Avril, there's some areas in the up in the northeast that when I go in to visit these people on their own, you it would be too much for me to actually do all of it. So, for example, in the Shetlands, I would meet this person at the Shetlands and look around to see who else can step in and help when it's sort of I'm not there and things like that. We'll maybe go have a meal, a chat, and a speech. And if they want to ask questions, then we can get together. And you know that yourself. Deaf people like gathering together. It's how we meet and exchange ideas, feelings, and thoughts. Another question that's coming in, Mary. Oh, it's a question from a text message, this and the question is, do you provide like like a Sunday school thing? Do you remember when you were small, for the children, you go to church and then after you go in the Sunday school, do you have that? No, there's no Sunday school at all. Is that something you might plan in the future? It's just difficult, Afro, because deaf people tend to be born to hearing families. And the other thing is a lot of the deaf children are now being mainstreamed and they're now being more isolated than they ever have before. So it's really difficult to get them all together. I would love it in the future if we could contact NDCS and see whether I could maybe visit, things that they're happening, gatherings with their children, and then I could be sort of a role model and introduce myself to the parents too. I think it's just so though they know that I'm there, but we don't have any Sunday school. We have a deaf base, uh, so we've had that, and people came there to visit. We've had it in Aberdeen. It's their own building. It's not our building. So there's been like a deaf school within a deaf hub within a hearing school. So I would go there maybe Easter and things like that. They'd invite me there and I would do sort of activities with the children. And I'm deaf myself. I know that deaf children want to use their hands and want to show and create, and they need that. They need that movement and that excitement. So I always go there with lots of visual activities and fun things to do. I mean, I'm just even thinking about it, it would be impossible one person to cover the whole of Scotland. But do you have any volunteers that you can turn on to support you when you need? Absolutely, I do, Avril. I do. They're really good volunteers. Wow, that's marvelous, and I'm so grateful to them because they're so give me so much help, and they're deaf, and these volunteers are deaf. Yes, they I just thank you to all of them. I could not do this job on my own. So we've got a question that's come in from Jordan Anderson, and he wants to know what is the culture like in deaf church, and how could you explain it to a hearing person to understand the difference in the culture within the church? Do you know what? The thing that I do is I just say to them, "Come along and have a look." Don't waste your energy trying to tell them because they'll never understand it. It's a visual thing. They have to come in and see it. And once they see it, they're mesmerized. It's the best experience. It's like the baptism of fire. So honestly, ever happens to me and I'm asked a question, I come in, I come straight out with, "Come on, come and join us, come and see." Always get the best reaction. Jordan has another question for you, and his question is a link to the studies. It's just about to come up on our screen. So, obviously, you studied theology at university, but would you be willing in the future maybe to train as a professor or lecturer so that you could then teach deaf people on that course? Oh, I would love to do something like that. I'd love to set up training for deaf people. I mean, something I've been thinking about and planning with the Church of Scotland. Because there's no materials at the moment. We would need to look at the materials that they have existing and adapt them to make sure they're culturally appropriate for deaf people. Um, and there'd be so much to prepare things. So the elders, that sign I'm using, it's the elders within our church. They do all the training. So what's an elder? Well, an elder is someone who supports the minister, and they have the power to sack the minister. Whoa, yes, they do, Avril. They do. So you would love to have more deaf people coming in, and that you could get them training. So maybe in the future, that's something you could think about. Yeah, yeah. I think the start is we have to look at what we have and see and look at how we can adapt things to make sure it's linguistically and culturally appropriate. Now you hear things about the same-sex marriage happening in Scotland. Is that something Church of Scotland offers and it's something you can do? Well, yes, Avril, but it was only just agreed there on May. It was at the General Assembly, and there was a vote given, and the vote was that yes, we should officiate over same-sex marriages. Um, there was no option to sort of opt out. It was the option of you opt in. So if you want to preside in that, then you opt in. So it could be two women, two men, whatever. And your name has to be put forward, yeah, to sort of like the top person, and then they then put your name on a register on the General Register of Scotland, and that's the official register, where your names have to be. So I handed my name in and said that I wanted, and I'm just waiting to be approved, and I'm hoping I'll hear very soon. So when you hear, hopefully, for the positive, your name would be in the register. It means that if there's any same-sex marriages in Scotland, you can officiate them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I'm sure there's people out here watching that are thinking, that might be what I'm looking for. Yep, absolutely. And it's something I can do. I just want to check and just clarify in case there's some confusion outside there. Now you've got your church services, and that's obviously your funeral and your weddings and everything else. But you've seen a lot of humanists coming out and doing a humanist service for a funeral? Is that something you would offer? Oh no, I can't. That's not my role. Um, I mean, I've had a look and I've asked the Church of Scotland, obviously because I'm aware, a lot of deaf people are asking for that now, and they advise me that no, it wouldn't be maybe wise, and it's kind of difficult for me as well because I believe so much in inclusiveness, and I want people to understand the Bible, enjoy hymns if they want, and things like that. Um, and a humanist funeral is just a personal story. It's about the person. So for me, when I think about a funeral, I think about all the things in the Bible stories and all the things of comfort. So yeah, but that's good though. I'm glad you clarified that, Mary. So if anybody was booking you, it would be a religious ceremony and not a humanist one. There's been something that's been going on in my head, and I've always wanted to ask people this. In hospitals, you've got all the uniforms and all the colours relate to sort of rank, if you like. And I've seen it in ministers, they've got red, pink, purple, wine, and blue. And I'm wondering, in your church, Church of Scotland, what's the rules with the clothes? There are none. The Church of Scotland, they're different. The Church of the Episcopalian Church and the Church of England, that's the sign for Episcopalian. It's very like the Church of England, and they have their own way of doing things. They have their own hierarchy. So the Queen is the head of the church. The Episcopalians have bishops, and that's why it's there. And they go right down through the ranks. And for that, they have very strict rules regarding dress and colour. However, the Church of Scotland, the Presbyterian part of the Church of Scotland, I'll just spell that for you. Okay, so their system is completely different. In the Presbyterian Church, we don't have bishops. We don't have anything like that. As far as we're concerned, everybody is on an equal footing. Ministers, elders are the same. We have one person who's at the top, and that's the moderator. Moderator, yep, moderator, and that's the sign for the moderator. And this person uh, uh, is elected at the General Assembly every year. And if you see someone with this kind of white, almost like material sort of coming out of their left shoulder, you will see it, and a fan. And regarding colour, we can wear any colour we like. It doesn't matter. It's just our preference. So do you pick your favourite colour then, Mary? Right. I know I've asked you the question about the colours, but the white bit, that's just white. That's always white. Yeah, I think the reason it's white was simply because it's white against a dark background, and I think it was just to make you stand out in a crowd, really. But sometimes you see. Do you ever see anybody with colours on the white tab? Nope, I haven't. I've seen all multicoloured tops, but not in the little white bit at the top. Got another question in from Linda. So, which is your busiest religious day? Christmas, Easter, or is it something else? Ooh, good question. Do you know, I think Christmas and Easter are both a lot of work. There's a lot of preparations because I like to make things for people, make little gift bags to give out. But also, I like to give things for the deaf children. So I plan with the elders, and they're all obviously all deaf, and we plan sort of like a me acting thing or a craft day and things to do. So you have a theatre as well. Oh yes. Oh, I know that. I remember before in Glasgow Deaf Club, the church had the theatre there as well, and it was lovely and it was great. Yes, because it's just so visual. Yeah, so you have the same setup. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So really, Christmas and Easter, they're the busy times. Absolutely. Any other festivals or times? Well, in Aberdeen in the past, they used to have a festival, and it was once a year, and I used to join in with that. It was through a hearing church, and our deaf church and the hearing church, joined together for this event. Obviously, the interpreters was voiceover, so everybody could understand. And sometimes we prepare for that. So we would have lots of different things to do and try and, get acting and doing some drama and getting the hearing people to sort of pick up what was going on too. Fantastic. Great question. Well, Mary, that the last few years, we've been in lockdown. I mean, you said it was very difficult being a minister in a church at that time and, with COVID and things like that. But did you adapt or did you have to change to Zoom? Well, Avril, it's older people, and especially older people. There was assumption they'd access to Zoom, but they don't. So we had to adapt things by using pictures, photographs, and writing in our in a deaf way in English, using our sort of deaf grammar. So have you not really had any events? Not yet. No, not yet. The things are planned for the future. They are being planned, but really the deaf church, the numbers have dwindled as well. So the the best thing we realise is for us to go out and meet rather than, and going at the deaf club and meeting there, and so we can have a day together. Yeah, have you seen that the deaf churches, the numbers of people are sort of diminishing, but I've noticed England has a lot of events and Zoom calls. I don't mean to say that we didn't have uh, a Zoom. No, 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 no. We had the BSL Facebook. No, no, we did have the internet, and we do some sort of live things and give some prayers and blessings and things out that way. I was just making the point that the Zoom is not always accessible to older people. Do you have any memories, any really fun, good memories of life in the church, Mary? Is there anything? Oh, yeah, the best one I can tell you about, I'll never forget it. It was 2 weeks before I was about to be ordained to become a minister. And it was one deaf person came running up to me in such a panic. They were so anxious, saying, I need to speak to you, I need to speak to you now. So I approached them. And I knew this person, and I knew they were going to get married soon, because I'd been invited. I knew it was only in a couple of weeks. So, well, actually, I knew it was going to be in 4 weeks' time, so like next month. And they said to me, I've been let down. Will you do it? And I'm like, but I'm only going to be ordained in 2 weeks. So I'd only be 2 weeks a minister. I'll have to ask. Well, I asked, was given approval. So the best thing was 2 weeks after I was ordained, I officiated my first deaf wedding, and it was amazing. We practiced 1 week before, going over the vows, as I said before, giving people choices of how they want to do it. Do you want to me to sign it and you copy the signs, or do you want me just to ask the question? All of these things. And this was so funny. The groom decided they wanted to ask the questions. So copied the question, but instead of signing it to their partner, they signed it to me and I said, are you marrying me? Well, the audience and everybody erupted and the deaf chap was like, oh, no, 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 I want to marry her. So that's so funny. But it was an amazing wedding. It was so successful and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it. Oh, I'm just having a wee look over to see these questions coming in. I think we've covered some of the questions. You've you you mentioned you've got elders, you've got ministers, elders, but there's deacons as well. And I know the elders, and you've got volunteers. But what's the difference between, if you like, an elder, a deacon? I mean, I don't know what is the difference. A deacon must be an elder. You see, you can't be a deacon without an elder. A minister must be an elder, so That's how it's appointed. So it's a kind of that's how you do it. So a minister um, maybe doesn't wear the collar, but it's been trained. So they've been through all the training, but they're not really doing the collar. So there's training for becoming leadership training, worship training, and some things you can do like officiate marriages, like a deacon can officiate a marriage. Is that right? In the Church of Scotland, you're not allowed to get married? No, we're allowed to get married. No, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Minister's allowed to get married. If a minister maybe couldn't even do a wedding, a deacon could do a wedding for them. So I've got another question here. You know that, like in the church, and you're looking at the future. That well, it used to be a lot of older people that were young then and now are getting old. But how do you attract a younger generation in now? Is it hard? It's really difficult because for us as well, deaf schools are practically non-existent now. We have these things called deaf bases within a hearing school, and I think there's 3 deaf bases that I've been to, so I know them and they know that I'm a minister. But most, of the deaf kids have been put into mainstream, so they're all on their own, isolated all over the country. So, if I want to go and visit them, they won't let me because it's within a hearing school. I try my best, but I'm thinking about maybe, contacting NDCS, you know, and maybe build up a relationship and see whether maybe NDCS would allow me to come to maybe some of their family events so that not just the young deaf people, but their parents can know I'm there. Because there's maybe young people out there that would see you as a role model, Mary, and that's something that, by being on this, at the BDA, and also the BDA has a Deaf Role Models project. So that's maybe something, that we could help with as well, so that for the future, so that young people can see that there's many careers and there's many lives that deaf people choose. I would love to do that, Avril. Really would love to. Now we're nearly at the end. Would you believe it? Honestly, that's nearly an hour. And I'm just checking over my questions to just check. So I've got the last question for you, Mary. Imagine your future. You're the minister. What would be your dream? Anything you want. Do you want to stay in Scotland or do you want to dump us and travel the world? What do you want to do? Oh no, I'm Scottish. I'm staying here. However, I do have a contact with a minister in Kenya, and it's a deaf minister there in Kenya. There's 2 there actually, and one of them had been over to Scotland, and I've went over there. So we've did the exchange, and that's been lovely. So the next 5 years, Mary, what do we expect to see from you? Well, I think what we're looking at is where we're noticing that deaf churches and deaf individuals going to churches or getting access to is diminishing, decreasing. So maybe I think maybe in the future we're looking for hearing churches to sort of uh, maybe include a deaf cultural service in one of their sermons. Not like mainstreaming it. I'm not saying that because we're different. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to work. But it would be nice if we could get um, some of the churches to allow me to come in and do that in the areas. And there's been a couple of the church officials who've paid me, to sort of try and look at, funding applications to try and get that if maybe some people have not got iPads and things like that, to try and set up a fund so that we can access that that we could get them that so they can access online services. So just to you were saying, so you're imagining like at the moment you're separate, um, but we could go in. We have in the hearing church, we have our own room within it. But I think in the future, what will happen is that we'll be able to have a service within the whole of the church. The problem is money. The Church of Scotland would love to do lots of things, but it's money. But in Aberdeen, there's only 10, well, there was 10 hearing churches closed. And we've only got one deaf church. And if that hearing church closes, the deaf close is within it. So who knows? I wish I could look into the future and tell you, but I don't know. Mary, thank you so much for telling us about your journey becoming a minister, what motivated you, what it's like, and the challenges and everything that went with it. And also, thank you for sharing your lovely experience about officiating over a deaf-blind wedding. That was amazing. I so appreciate your time. I hope everybody at home enjoyed it as much as I did. Bye bye.